Hi everybody, this is Agnes from Sediment, and today we are giving Caymus a second chance. I think that was rather provocative introduction, but here is the story. A while ago, I asked you guys here on YouTube and also over on Instagram, what in your opinion are the most overrated wines? And one wine was mentioned more than any other. Caymus Vineyards Cabernet Sauvignon. So I went out and bought that bottle. I bought a few more wines from California and tasted them blind before making any judgment myself. I will link that video in the description below if you want to see how that tasting turned out. I received many comments on that video and several of you pointed out that style of Caymus has changed and what was once considered their iconic wine is now bottled under the label Caymus Vineyards Special Selection Cabernet Sauvignon. You also suggested that that is the wine I really should taste if I want to understand where Caymus originally gained its glory. So today, amongst these hidden bottles, I do have the Caymus Vineyards Special Selection, along with 4 other California Cabernet Sauvignons. So we can do a similar blind tasting and see what's so special about Caymus Special Selection. Let's start. Let's start the tasting. As always, these wines were poured by my cameraman, so I don't know which one is which. Let's start with wine number 1. Look at this deep, intense color. We are in Cabernet Sauvignon world, and judging by the nose, this Cabernet Sauvignon is coming from warm and sunny climate. We are indeed in California. So we do feel these really ripe, dark plums. We feel blackberries, blueberries. Of course, we do have cassis. But what I really enjoyed on the nose about this wine, it does show some of that sweet spiciness, some of those herbs, some dried Mediterranean spices. You know, we are talking about rosemary and thyme, maybe even some hints of floral elements. It is quite aromatic, but the very first nose that I picked up was quite ripe and chocolatey, but with time it is developing in the glass and it is showing a bit more complexity. It does also tell you that it's going to be big and opulent wine, so let's taste it. Here comes the ripeness, here comes the sunshine. It is really ripe, sweet fruit-driven shaped wine on the palate. It does have that elevated acidity that we expect from Cabernet Sauvignon, but here the acidity is really wrapped with ripe fruit, almost sweet fruit. I did feel that sweetness on the very first sip and at the finish as well. We do have elevated tannin, but they're ripe. It definitely is a big and powerful wine. There is some underlined elegance to it on the palate. It is more felt on the nose though. I will give this wine 92 points. Let's move to wine number 2. While the wine number 1 was really intense and out there and shining right from the start, wine number 2 seems a bit shyer, restrained on the nose at least. But it does show some of the spiciness, but here the spices are a bit towards the sweeter style. So now we are talking about cinnamon, nutmeg. It is really toasty vanilla. And somewhere in the background, I have hints of juniper berry. I really like the nose of juniper berries. They're quite spicy and intense. And adds a bit of complexity, you know, that forest-like element to the wine. Okay. Let's taste the wine number 2. This is really interesting wine because I feel like we are having a bit of conflict here. From one side, I feel this wine has that power, has that sunshine, has that intensity and concentration. And from the other side, I feel there's a bit of that Europe identity almost. It does show elevated acidity. It does show thinner, you know, bones. It does show a bit of verticality as opposed to wine number 1, which was big and round and really out there type of wine. On the very first sip, I do feel that sweetness that I associate with Napa, you know, that sunshine in the glass. But afterwards, the acidity comes and it just swoops it all away. There's this really beautiful elegance to it and absolutely beautiful sweet tasting tannin. The aftertaste is really long, and I do feel that this wine has elevated alcohol. I do feel a bit of warmth, but it is not overpowering the fruit. It is in no way dominating the palate or burning, you know, because sometimes alcohol can be too much. Here, I think this wine is slightly quiet, but really beautiful and adds a lot of conversation, adds a lot of story to it. I will give this wine 94 points. I do think it can develop into something even more complex and beautiful. Let's move to wine number 3. All right, so here, right from the start, I have these black cherries that are dipped in chocolate. So this is really, again, we are back into the sunshine, into the beach. We do have a bit of spiciness. We do have that toasted vanilla. We do have cedarwood and cigar box here on the nose as well. We have that chocolate, that milk chocolate as well, or cacao bean. Here we have a bit of grippier tannin type, a bit coarser, rounder, bigger tannin. It is still very ripe, but it is not as well integrated maybe as in wine number 1 and 2. We have really sweet and luscious tasting palate. That was really interesting. So this wine, I might ask, maybe there is some of that residual sugar. I do feel warmth from the alcohol, and maybe here in this case, it is not as well integrated as it was in wine number 2. In this wine, alcohol seems slightly rustic and maybe swoops away a little bit all that fruit, that lusciousness that we had on the palate before. It is really ripe on the nose, and that chocolatey element, it's just dominating. For my palate personally, I think this wine lacks a bit of elegance and lightness, and that could be introduced through higher acidity here. I think this wine is really luscious and ripe, but I think just some lightness, some delicacy, some elegance to this wine would just make it much greater, more beautiful wine. And I will give this wine 90 points. Let's move to wine number 4. If wine number 3 had that really ripe, but not crushed cherry dipped in chocolate, then wine number 4 has a lot of cherry elements. They're just bursting, they're crushed, and it's all just cherry juice all around us. It's black cherry, of course. This is just so intense. Like you close your eyes and you feel all that, you know, you're in a cherry tree. When I was growing up, I was a tomboy, and I would just climb in the trees. I had a garden. I would climb in the trees and eat fruit directly from the trees. So I have these memories, and this is it. This is really that. It's so intense on the nose. That black cherry, that sweet cherry. We have some spices here and there, you know, some nutmeg maybe, some toast, but not that sweet vanilla toast, but that, you know, that earthy toastiness to it. Maybe some plum and fresh forest blueberries. On the palate, this wine delivered completely different picture than it said on the nose. So on the nose, it was bursting with these cherries, and I was expecting some acidity, some freshness, some bursting of fruit. But on the palate, it was actually really ripe and opulent and towards, you know, larger bone structured style. Similarly as wine number 3, wine number 4 also has that sweetness, that ripe fruit sweetness on the palate, But here it really seems more drying in character, more like dried fruit character. And it also seems bitter chocolatey. Bitter chocolate, I like that flavor usually quite a lot because it also adds a flavor of earthiness to the wine. You know, bitter chocolate, the one that you have really high cacao percentage and not a lot of sugar in it, it is also earthy. So it adds that kind of breath. Anyhow, it finishes completely dry, and I will give this wine 91 points. Let's move to wine number 5, which is our last wine. All right, so this is interesting and quite unique. It stands out between all of these wines. There's some sourness to it, some savoriness to it. It's like, I don't know, slightly smoky, damp earth. This is really, really complex. And if wine number 3 and 4 had that sweet cherry element, this one has sour cherry, but really ripe, almost overripe, but it's sour cherry. We do feel that. There is some redness to it. All these wines, and for me at least, Cabernet Sauvignon usually smells of blue and blackberries, colored berries. And here I have some of that redness to it, red color to it. Almost like crushed cranberries, could that be? This wine seems a bit lighter boned on the palate, but it definitely did not deliver the same excitement I felt on the nose, because on the nose I was like, okay, I really want to try this and it's really interesting and exciting. But on the palate, maybe because I felt all those red cherries, those expressive aromas, almost cranberry-like, you know, because cranberry is a bit more sour. It has higher acidity. I was expecting that same bursting acidity on the palate, but on the palate it was really calm. And it does have beautifully textured, really typical Cabernet Sauvignon tannin, a bit maybe rustic and, you know, coarser in character. But I was really hoping for a bit higher acidity to add freshness, to add the wave to the wine. Now on the nose, it is actually opening up a little bit and adding a bit vanilla and toastiness to otherwise that fresh fruit character. So it is evolving and developing. All right. Maybe I was a bit too harsh with this wine initially, because with the second and third sip, it proved to be a bit nicer, and it has that bitter chocolate that I talked with you in the wine 4. It has that bitter chocolate element here, but without that sweetness, that earthy character, you know, and bitter chocolate also gives you that tannin texture. So I really associate this wine with that beautiful, high quality, you know, almost melting on your palate, bitter chocolate bite without that sweetness. Also without that acidity. I guess that makes sense because we are in really sunny and quite dry climate. So I will give this wine 92 points, 91.5, because I do think it is higher in quality than wine number 4. But I do think that wine number 1 was also nicer. I must look like a Walking Dead character by now. Okay, we have scored all the wines. Shall we reveal the wines? All right, so wine number 1, I gave 92 points. Oh, it's Dunn Vineyards Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon. So Dunn Vineyards, which is interesting, does only 2 labels. And I think the other label has been on the Wine Spectator's top 10 at some point. I don't think I have tasted it though. So this is Napa Valley. And I think it was quite well crafted and beautiful wine, 2019 vintage, which is interesting. It has been aged in oak, in new oak for quite a while. And it does show that complexity, that spiciness, but it is not overpowering the fruit, which I think is really interesting. And sometimes I find this in wines, when they are aged longer, the oak somehow shows better integration with the fruit. So this is really interesting. 32 months in completely new French oak and absolutely magnificent wine. So let's move to wine number 2, which was my favorite from all these 5 wines. I gave this wine 94 points. Corison, 2017 vintage, by the way. St. Helena, Napa Valley, Cabernet Sauvignon. It did not show the age. I think that some of the wines showed more age in the glass than this one. And this was actually suggested to me by Vince from V's for Vino, so thank you very much. And I think this wine had that elegance, had that complexity, that delicacy and quality. I do think this is really exciting and very interesting wine, and definitely slightly outside of the typical style that you would expect from Californian Cabernet Sauvignon. It had that elegance and it showed quite a lot of freshness, something that maybe I was missing in some other wines on today's selection. Let's move to wine number 3, which I gave 90 points and which was the lowest scored wine. Still quite high. 90 points is a high score. No wonder, Caymus Vineyards Special Selection Cabernet Sauvignon. This wine has 16% alcohol. Seeing the number, I would say it was quite well integrated, though I believe I was talking about alcohol being really prominent on the palate. I was not expecting 16. I was maybe expecting a bit closer to 15 or maybe 14.8 or something. So 16% alcohol is quite high. It had that sweetness. I remember I was talking about Caymus Cabernet Sauvignon because it also had sweetness, and I guess that is their character, that is their style. What I found especially interesting about this one is how they select which wines are going to become special selection. Usually in Europe, more or less, but usually the practice is that we have premium vineyards, so better vineyards, better exposure, specific site that will yield higher quality fruit. In this case, Caymus Special Selection is according to them, specifically selected barrels that they think are of better quality or that they think offer higher concentration. And this wine is really bigger, bolder, richer than the Caymus Cabernet Sauvignon. So let's move to wine number 4, which I gave 91 points. Austin Hope 2022 Paso Robles, so Cabernet Sauvignon. So Austin Hope really gained their reputation with Rhone grape varieties. So Cabernet Sauvignon maybe was an odd choice from my side, but we are tasting Cabernet Sauvignon today. And I think it had that identity of warmth and identity of, big and opulent and sunny climate. It was not as sweet tasting maybe as the wine number 3. All right, so let's move to wine number 5. Which is Eisele Vineyards Altagracia Cabernet Sauvignon. So it is not completely 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It does have some other grapes added. We don't know, maybe some of these wines as well. They just put this on the label. So it is 86% Cabernet Sauvignon, 11 Cabernet Franc, and 3 Petit Verdot. So maybe that was the reason why I really enjoyed the nose, because it was selection of several grapes and adding a bit of complexity from the grape varieties as well. They are linked with Chateau Latour. And while I was tasting this wine, really on the nose, when I was talking about it, I thought that maybe it has some of that, Bordeaux identity to it a little bit. But, structure never lies, I always say that. And on the palate, a bit lower acidity and a bit warmer and sweeter fruit was really what was shining. So this is where the identity really showed itself, where this wine is coming from. I gave this wine 91.5 points. So you guys, the question remains, has Caymus Vineyards redeemed themselves? I think in my last tasting, I gave it 89 points, the Caymus Vineyards Cabernet Sauvignon. This one increased by 1 point. The price doubled because Caymus Vineyards Cabernet Sauvignon is around 100 euros or dollars, and Caymus Vineyards Special Selection is twice that price. I think the cheapest one here, around $80, is Austin Hope. And we would expect from Paso Robles to be a bit more approachable price-wise. Of course, it is still ultra-premium priced wine. I guess Caymus has a unique style because when I tasted this wine, immediately what I had in my mind was, could this be Caymus? Because I remember my previous tasting and that sweetness and that lusciousness, and maybe here it was slightly toned down, but you still had that signature of Caymus in it, that ripeness, that opulence, that bigness. And I will be really honest with you. I know that I can spend my 200 euros on different wines, and I would have way more pleasure in my own glass. For me, the greatest discovery today was Corison. I did not know this producer, this estate. It is led by women. The winemaker is woman, and I think that's beautiful. There's that really nice elegance underlined in this wine. And while I was preparing for this video, I actually did read about this producer, and it said that this is actually anti-cult producer, and I thought that was fun and interesting. It still costs premium though, so it is slightly above 100 euros, 130 euros is the price. But I think here it really delivers and adds, and tells a story. Thank you guys for watching this video. Let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on these wines. Which of these labels is your favorite? Please let me also know if you have some gems that I should definitely discover. And if you have any additional thoughts on Caymus Special Selection Cabernet Sauvignon. Meanwhile, if you have some time to spare, make sure to watch this video next.